In this video, we're going to get familiar with an editor's secret arsenal, which is BorisFX Continuum's transitions, and how this is going to enhance what's available inside the Avid Media Composer host. If you're following along with the exercise files, head to your Continuum Avid Essentials training sequences, and inside of that bin, just double click the For Transitions sequence. What we want to do is just zoom in on the first two clips in the timeline. So I'm just pressing Command right square bracket, and we're going to add a transition over these two clips. Let's go to the Effects workspace. And inside that workspace, in our Effects palette, we've been focused on the Filters tab. We're just going to move over to the Transitions tab, where there's a category for BCC transitions and 40 plus to choose from. Now, while there are so many, there are really just two main types of transitions. There are wipes and there are dissolves, with other effects integrated into a wipe or dissolve. There's also one other specific effect that we'll get to in a second with transitions, but in many cases, there are just variations of those two. In any transition that you choose, the workflow is similar. We'll just select a transition, and in this case, apply it to the edit point of our incoming and outgoing clip. Once applied, I've entered into effect mode already. We have some on-screen controls that we can take advantage of for our transition. And in the record monitor, I'm just going to press play so we can see how the glow dissolve interacts over the period of a second. Now, similar to Continuum effects, if we go into the effects editor by clicking on the empty checkbox, there's an advantage to working in here that we already have looped playback turned on inside the viewer. So we can watch our transition playback, and then also just choose from a series of presets and see the different impact it has in between our incoming and outgoing clip. In addition to choosing these presets, we could also adjust the properties / parameters here at the side for film glow. I'll increase the intensity in this case. We can see it gets much brighter there in the spot, not to mention the radius of the glow, so it affects more of the overall image. And we'll see it update here quite quickly. One really unique section of Continuum transitions is the color correction area. And if we twirl down the properties for that section, we can integrate a color correction on our clip as the transition occurs. So for instance, maybe I want these clips to be completely black and white as the glow takes place. So I'll bring down the saturation to -100. Notice that it ramps from color to black and white along with the glow, and then ramps back to color from black and white as it exits its way out. See this in a different way. Could set the saturation all the way to a high value like 200, and its impact on the glow, not to mention on our clip. So I'll reset that value. Keep in mind we can play with just an overall color temperature of our shots, which allows us to integrate not only the glow dissolve, but with these color corrections, create a really unique look. I'll now settle on bringing that temperature to a more subtle value. So I'm going to apply that, and carries on over here into Avid, where we can see our transition again. And let's now move further into the timeline. So I'm going to zoom out, and we'll go over the third and second last clip here, where I'll take a good look at what those on-screen controls do. So for this, I'm going to go to another dissolve. So in this case, we'll go to Crash Zoom, a very popular effect that allows us to dissolve and also just zoom in onto another clip. I'll go into the effect mode again, where I can see the on-screen controls for the transition, and now just play back the transition where we can see quite an aggressive zoom in from one shot to the other. Now, if you draw your attention to the incoming clip, you'll notice a repeated pattern here. And similar to some other effects that we saw in Continuum, filters that we used earlier, there is an edge mode value currently set to reflect that we can change to transparent or repeat, which will change how it looks on the edges of our clip. But I'll set it to reflect for now. We also have a zoom delta control, which we can make more aggressive for how much we zoom in, or even reverse the zoom direction. And again, if I just press play in the record monitor, I never have to exit this workspace. And now it's acting more as a crash zoom out than a zoom in. Now, as for the on-screen controls, so they're going to work the same way in the effects editor as well, but with the added benefit that we can make these changes as continuing to play back without enabling a looped playback. You'll notice how we have these easing controls for how we ease out of the transition, and also how the transition eases in the middle of its action. The values that I'm adjusting here with this yellow curve can be found in animation tuning. So notice how I affect, in this case, the ease mid value and its impact on how this transition now feels. So for the actual crash, in this case, I'm just going to drag it down so it's a really fast midpoint, but maybe add just a little bit more easing at the beginning and end. It slowly gets more dramatic as we get to the midpoint, and then just eases out at the very end here as well. At the very bottom, we also have a dissolve duration that we can play with the other curve over our clip, but for now, we'll just reset that value and leave it at its default, applying this inside of the Avid Media Composer host. All right, let's take a look at the end results of the easing that we did within the effects editor with our Crash Zoom. And now it's time to take a look at the second main type of transition, which are wipes. So we've looked at dissolves. Wipes can fall into two categories. There are shape-based wipes, which we'll get into in a second, but not to mention just wiping an image across the screen. And for that, we have swishes. If you take a look in the BCC transition category, there are a series of swishes that we can take advantage of. And let's start off by looking at the Swish Prism effect. So I'm actually going to replace the transition that we've been working with so far, the Crash Zoom, and I just dragged over the new Swish Prism. And let's just take a look at what happens here. We can see that there is a linear wipe moving from one image to the other, mixed with a prismatic effect that is overlaid on top of the image. We'll head to the effects editor like we've done before. So we're able to, in order to see the swish a bit better, I am going to go to the Prism shift value and just set this to a value of 0. And I'm also going to lower the blur, which is also involved in the transition effect, to 50. Now we can see we're moving from one image to the other, and the pan direction identified at the top of the parameter list is set to left. We can easily switch that to be to top to bottom. And we could also decide on moving or wiping the image from one to the other multiple times. So if I change the roll speed here to a value of 2, now we rotate or wipe across the image several different times. We can do 3, and then we could add some separation between these images too. So let me first of all bring the roll speed down to 2. And to see the separation, I'll just increase that. And you should start to see a black line between our two video clips, the outgoing and incoming clip. Right now it's set to a transparent background, but if you enable colored background, you can choose from any solid color that you like to be in between the two wiped images. In addition to this, you could start to play with the depth of prism effect, not to mention how you want the prism to be shifted along with the swish, to create one of several different looking effects, not to mention controls over our color correction and animation tuning. I'll apply that effect, and let's take a look at another type of wipe, in this case a shape-based wipe. I'm going to go and choose linear wipe, and this actually happens to be a transition that I use quite a bit to show before and after results with Continuum or Sapphire-based effects. So we see here right now the wipe from one image to another with a very faint line. We can control some of these controls at the top of the effect. If I bring down the softness all the way to 0, that becomes hard-edged. And I could also rotate this. In fact, I'll settle on 240 degrees and then just play back the current wipe in the record monitor. Now we can also add a line shape to this in this effect by enabling the border setting. So if you enable all, this happens to be a combination of 3 lines or 3 borders. What I'm going to do, because I just want to have one, is go to the border 2 properties and bring the thickness down to 0. I'll also repeat that with the border 3. And with the border 1, just increase the line to a value of 15. So I'll click on the dot and then type in 1.5. Now we can see the linear wipe from one image to the other. In addition to a linear wipe, we also have a couple other shape wipes that you can take advantage of. We have a texture-based wipe and a vignette wipe that could also be handy for transitioning from one clip to another. Now, I'm just going to move down a little bit further here into the timeline over the last 2 clips here, so we could take a look at a very unique effect, which was recently added to the BCC Plus category called Flutter Cut. Just a quick note regarding the Flutter Cut transition. If you suffer from photo or light sensitivity, you may want to fast forward or skip this section, as in it is a flash flickering effect. So I'll apply that to the transition edit point here. I'll make sure that I am in effect mode so we can see the transition. And this happens to be a combination of a flash frame effect mixed with, at this point, video glitch. If we take a closer look at this effect, let's head to the effects editor and start to look at the properties of this. Right now, the effects type at the bottom is set to video glitch. I'm going to set that to off so we could see what's going on just underneath that and what's causing the flash frame effect. There are a certain amount of outgoing start frames and incoming start frames which are causing this flash to occur. Now, what we can do is if we start to bring up, say, the incoming end flash frames, I'm going to bring that up to a value of 10, we have a much more aggressive flash of that incoming clip. Versus I could do the same thing to the outgoing frames. I could also even add a fade in between these flashes. Now, in addition to this, we can overlay an effect type. So right now we saw video glitch first. We have an effect amount, which is how strong the video glitch is applied over the image. But we can choose from another setting like invert monochrome. And right now I just want you to notice that the effect is being applied to both the incoming and outcoming clip. We can choose the target, in this case, to just be one or the other. So I'm just going to choose the monochromatic effect to affect the outgoing clip. And you can see this could be very helpful in transitioning between these 2 video clips, which were shot from a music video. And like all our transitions here in the effects editor, you can choose from several to see different types of flash frame transitions using some of the effects that are overlaid on top, like X-ray. I'll apply that to the clip, carries on over, and here is the result that we end up with the X-ray effect on these 2 clips. Just to show one final effect, I'm going to add BCC Film Roll and taking a look yet again in effects mode. So we get those on-screen controls where you see some of the similarities of, in this case, a effect that rolls our clips or wipes from one image to the other through movement of a roll mixed with some film grunge overlaid on top of the video. Now you may be thinking to yourself, several of these transitions feel like some of the filters within BorisFX Continuum, and that's absolutely true. We have video glitch, we have film glows as a transition, as well as a filter for a flexible workflow. So in taking a look at some of the film roll properties, you'll see that this is an effect mixed with film grunge, film glow, blurs, and not to mention our color correction and animation tuning. We also have a roll speed, which determines how many times we roll from the one outgoing clip to the incoming clip. And we can change that roll direction from top to bottom. Now, the last thing I wanted to mention is we can make any one of these effects a quick transition that we can easily apply with a button or a shortcut inside of Avid. How we can set this up is to go to our bins, and inside our bins, I'm just going to right click to create a new bin, which I'm going to call Quick Transitions. I'm going to make sure that the Q and the T are capitalized and the bin is open. And with the bin open, I'm going to drag the film roll effects from the effect editor into the bin. now making this an easily accessible transition. And I'll just move to an earlier clip here in the timeline and now apply the quick transition. So I'll just click the button down here just above the timeline. And you can see that BCC plus Film Roll is at the top of the list. Once I apply that, now that happens to be my favorite transition. And I can start to manipulate it as soon as I go into my effect mode. And that's how easy and flexible it is to work with transitions from BorisFX Continuum inside of Avid Media Composer. Let's continue our journey in mastering Continuum by looking at how we can composite inside of Avid.